Hi, you there? Okay, yeah. Oh, glad we could meet. Oh, I think you're on mute. Yeah. You're still on mute? Okay, yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah, how are you? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. Yeah, nothing to complain about. I gotta say my arms are really tired from flipping houses all day. Just a little bit of real estate humor for you. Um, Oh, before we get started, let me just let you know that I did have to shut my dogs in the bedroom, and so you might hear them barking, but they're okay. They just, um, I named them Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and when we talk real estate, they get a little lonely. Get it? Sorry, another realtor joke for you. Anyway, okay, so down to business. You sent an email that's saying you work exclusively from home and you're looking for a bigger place. And since all you really need is a strong Wi-Fi signal for work, you're interested in moving internationally, perhaps. And so you'd like to look at some real estate, know where the best places to invest. I got to say that you must be an FHA loan because you certainly have my interest. Just another realtor joke there. Sorry. Okay. With the worldwide recession going on right now, and the real estate market here in the country being really hot, you have a good chance of getting a good profit and then being able to invest it somewhere. And so I think this is a good move for you. And if I understand correctly from your email, you do have kids, and so you're extremely worried about good schools, right? So I did research, and I'm prepared here during this Zoom conference to talk about the different options as far as schooling goes. However, it is difficult to compare apples to apples in vastly different countries. But one thing comparative education experts agree on is that you can judge a country's education quality by its commitment to what they call human capital theory. Basically, it's the idea that some countries invest in natural resources, but a good government invests in developing human resources. And a good example for that is Ireland. Despite years of oppression and colonialism and civil war, the government has spent a lot of money in trying to invest in its people. And as a result, they've become, wealthy and a successful nation. So that's kind of what we're looking at. That's what we're judging countries by as we look at different places around the world. By the way, do you know what a house usually wears? An address. Get it? Address. Okay. Well, I like that one. Okay. Let's start with Africa. Africa has great scenery. It's got good weather. It's got tasty food. It is affordable. A lot of investors in the know are investing heavily there. Plus, it's the home of anteaters. My kids love anteaters, one of their favorite animals. That reminds me of a story. I knocked on a door once to ask if they'd be interested in putting their house up for sale. And when they opened the door, there was nobody there. But I looked closer and noticed little bugs. And I asked if they were the owners of the home, and they said, "No, can't you tell? We're 10 ants." Okay, just another real estate joke. Anyway, so real estate has a great potential to grow in value in Africa. Unfortunately, not many countries there are doing well with investing in human capital. A lot of nations have taken money from foreign governments and foreign entities, and in return, they're supposed to implement education reform. Some of these changes, including decentralization of control over schooling, segregation of grades, so they're not all together in one schoolroom, changes to teacher training. These have been slow in coming in a lot of African nations. And some experts are wondering if it's even wise to demand those changes. After all, those things worked well in America and the former Soviet Union. And so that's why, countries demand them in exchange for money. But there is a cultural difference there. And a lot of nations in the Middle East, Central Asia, South America, and a lot of African nations, those changes haven't been making as big a difference as people expected. Also, it's been difficult to implement the changes, honestly, just because of the significant cultural differences. There's just no one-size-fits-all approach to education. So even though African nations have done their best to appease foreign investors, there have been some disappointing results. Now, that's not to say that the countries haven't been really trying. Nigeria, for example, has made many reforms. One was to adopt some years ago English as the language of instruction in schools. They did that to help the nation's labor force overcome deep resentments and discrimination among the three major cultural groups there. By teaching students English, they were able to help them, jump into globalization opportunities. Likewise, the tiny nation of Rwanda has adopted French as the official language of instruction, as well as for the same reasons, and joined the Commonwealth of Nations, even though they were never a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, just to try to focus on globalization and distract the different ethnic groups from domestic tensions, and try to get people focused on competing in a larger market. One of the fun things about sub-Saharan Africa is they have, on average, larger family sizes. Plus, they tend to be very friendly people. By the way, that reminds me of a joke. Yesterday, I knocked on a door, and a little girl came to the door, and I said, "Is your mom home?" And she said, "I'm pretty sure she is." And I said, "Can I talk to her?" And she just said, "Sure." And I said, "So does she have time now?" And the little girl said, "Probably," but the little girl's just standing there, not going anywhere. And so I ring the doorbell, and nobody came to the door. So I rang it again, and nobody came to the door. And I said to the little girl, "I thought you said your mom was home." And the little girl said, "Well, she is, but I live across the street." Okay, another house joke. Anyway, so I highly recommend South Africa, okay? South Africa's ANC party has worked really hard since the liberation of Nelson Mandela to modernize and overcome the injustices of apartheid. And while many point to South Africa as a rising star in Africa, the education system is still struggling from the inequality institutionalized by decades of apartheid. And in spite of reforms and progress, there is still a white South Africa and a black South Africa, and they're having trouble merging into one. Still, if it were my family and we were moving to Africa, I would choose South Africa. The rest of sub-Saharan Africa has a lot more challenges. For example, Angola has a lot of good things going for it. The capital city, Luanda, is probably the most advanced on the west coast of Africa. It's not a bad place to look for houses, but honestly, clientelism, due to the rich oil reserves, interferes with effective governance, which interferes with the implementation of modern education reforms, including investment in human capital. Sometimes the more wealthy a nation is in natural resources, the less arduously they invest in development of human resources. So just keep that in mind. But it just seems to be a trend that nations without vast natural resources struggle to fund education due to poor economies and the lingering effects of civil war, like in Liberia and Sierra Leone. So when they have natural resources, patronage, clientelism makes it hard for them to invest in education. If they don't have natural resources, poverty, civil war, strife tends to make it hard for them to invest in education. It's just kind of one of those problems. Half of the world's school-age girls who are not in school live in sub-Saharan Africa. And so a lot of these countries, when they do invest money in education, they tend to invest in educating boys, hoping that once the GDP improves, they can put more money toward educating girls. Although a growing number of experts believe this is backwards. They believe that prioritizing the education of girls is going to make more of a difference in the economy. They're going to see more of a return on their investment, especially when the girls grow up to become mothers and teach their children to value education more. But due to cultural differences, this has been a tough policy to implement. So that's where it is. And when we're talking about lacking natural resources and just lacking the funding to adequately fund education, a lot of cool places to buy real estate are small countries. And small countries really have trouble. So there are several in Africa. I talked about Rwanda. There's Malawi, which tries to teach everybody English, but has really struggled with something like 20 different dialects. But if I were going to invest in real estate abroad, I'd look in the Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean. But if you're worried about schools for your kids, those are some places with some real struggles. The tiny countries in the Caribbean and in the Pacific Ocean have really struggled with implementing the educational policies that they have seen work in America and the former Soviet Union. They try to make their schools look like European schools, and it just doesn't quite work out. Now, I know that you are probably leaning toward those locales. Honestly, when people think about foreign investment, they want to have an ocean nearby. They want to they want to play in the waves. They want to collect seashells. I get it. And honestly, what I love most about homes on the beach is they have lots of windows. Let me tell you, they're easy to sell to doctors because of all the window panes. Get it? Panes? Okay, sorry, another real estate joke. But honestly, you can always move back to the States and hold on to the house as an education property. Sorry, vacation property if the educational opportunities don't quite work out for you. Remember, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy a vacation home, and that's almost the same thing. You can quote me on that one. But seriously, let's keep in mind that the schools in the tiny countries aren't that great. But that's not to say they're not really trying, and they're being really creative to solve their problems. With high-speed internet, a lot of these governments are taking advantage of online resources to improve teacher training, as well as online resources to improve the professionalism of their administrators, as well as their Ministry of Education personnel. And also, the internet is really helping these nations keep up to date on their curriculum and helping them collaborate with other smaller nations to pool resources. For example, there's some exciting growth in higher education in these tiny countries. The several former members of the Commonwealth, but they're part of the Commonwealth of Nations, formerly of the British system. Anyway, in the Caribbean, have joined together to find a joint university that's really quite cool. It reminds me of what we have in the Western U.S. called Western Governors University, where small governments collaborate on a large online university that's cheaper for its people. And so that's helping educate the people in these tiny nations. But honestly, they're also having trouble with teacher retention because, once a kid either gets educated abroad or gets educated through this online university, they can usually make more off their tiny island. And so not a lot of people want to come back or stay in order to become a teacher and raise up the next generation. So that's been tough. Also, these countries have really tried hard to educate their people to prepare them for the national industry. But the national industry is sometimes kind of fickle. It could be tourism, seafood, bananas, sugarcane. And sometimes the market situation on these products change. Sometimes, the tourism is heavily impacted by things like, the COVID problem we've got now. And so, if they invest too much energy in trying to prepare the next generation to participate in that national industry, sometimes it can be a mistake and cause problems. So, another thing to think about is, the tiny nation of Kiribati, some people pronounce it Kiribati, used to be part of the Gilbert Islands. Some people think it might be underwater in 50 years. And so no basements there, which makes me sad because basements make for great sellers. Get it? Another real estate pun. Basements, sellers. Anyway, so they can make great real estate investments, but as far as educating your kids, it might be problematic. You said in your email that you were really interested in places with beaches like Belize and Costa Rica, and I can definitely help you find some good properties there. As far as education goes, there's been improvement in recent decades. In South America as a whole, actually all of Latin America, as many girls now attend school as boys, which is really, really good improvement, really exciting. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico in particular have made great strides in reducing inequality in the preschool and elementary grades, as well as helping more children gain access to education and improve that gender parity. However, these nations are also seeing increasing inequity in secondary and higher education as economic development benefits certain sectors and certain regions differently. It's not been equal. Their economic development has not affected each part of the country equally. Still, a vacation home in Mexico is very trendy right now. I know there's a ton of listings on Zillow, although home property evaluations on Zillow are about as useful as the G in lasagna. You can quote me on that too. But places like Guyana, great beaches, but they have a surprisingly small population for their large land masses, which interferes with their ability to manage effective education systems across the vast provinces. The good news is that most homes in the region are 3 rooms, dining room, living room, and room to negotiate. Sorry, another real estate joke there. But anyway, like South Africa, Brazil is considered a rising star in Latin America. It too has gross inequality and struggles to improve education over its vast land masses. However, its government has more than doubled spending on education from 2000 to 2008. and per pupil spending as a percentage of GDP increased from 3.5 to 5.3% during the same time period. That is getting close to what Europe spends. So that's exciting. However, the recession hit the nation hard. And it's struggling to improve, but it is trying. And equity has become a relatively recent priority. But all things considered, I think your family could be happy in Brazil. Asia, on the other hand, is a little tricky. For starters, it's so big, it's hard to summarize, Asia. So starting with Central Asia, Kazakhstan is working hard to join the international community, has offered large salaries to foreign professors to join their new universities. But honestly, I can't recommend Central Asia. As we've seen with Afghanistan in the news, Central Asian nations also struggle with patronage and clientelism in their governments. So natural resources wealth isn't necessarily resulting in development for all. There's just nothing terribly impressive to say about what's going on with the development of human capital in Central Asia. And as you know, Central Asia is landlocked, which means all the homes there are really heavy, very dense, because they don't have any lighthouses. Get it? No coastline, so no lighthouses. All right, enough with the puns. Anyway, to the south of Central Asia, India is really exciting. India is a land of extremes, for sure. You've probably visited India on vacation. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. About a quarter of the world's school-age girls who are not in school live in South Asia, but the situation is improving faster than in Africa, so that's kind of a good sign. India has decreased poverty by up to 10% in the last 25 years, and per pupil spending as a percentage of GDP was 3.8% in 2009, which is about half of where the European nations are at, but still it's improving. The caste system there still interferes with efforts to improve equity, but as a nation modernizing, the role of caste begins to diminish. And I know a couple of good agents in India that could help us shop for some property. So it's not a bad option. Now, China, however, is a mixed bag. I know people who really like China. They live in China. They love it. They don't have any intention of moving back to the United States. They really like it. By the way, I know a broker there who says he gives out a free abacus for every sale of a home, but I wouldn't count on it. Get it? Abacus, count on it? Okay, anyway. It is a large country with a lot of poverty, and that creates regional inequalities in education development. For example, we're seeing evidence of horrific discrimination in the northwest of the country right now. Unrest in Hong Kong is really, really scary. But in the more stable northeast, the schools are good, including the university. China spends 16.3% of its public expenditures on education, which is really, really impressive. However, because it's such a big country, that only equates to 3.3% of GDP, which is, again, half of what more developed countries spend. A big problem is that half the population lives in remote rural areas, and that makes it difficult for per pupil spending to be equal in urban versus rural areas. Also, the gender gap is minimal, so that's impressive. However, only 5% of adults have a higher education degree. Only 65% of secondary students graduate, compared with 82% in most developed countries. However, I think you'd find living in China to be a great adventure. I wouldn't recommend it in terms of real estate investment. As far as an investment growing, besides home shopping in China is going to mean a lot of high rises, and in China that can mean broken elevators. And you know what the worst thing about a broken elevator pun is? They're just not very uplifting. Get it? Elevator pun, not very uplifting. Anyway, okay, that one wasn't very good. But you could be very happy in China. Not a great real estate investment. Mixed bag for the schools. The rest of East Asia has a lot of really exciting things happening. Gender parity in most of East Asia is really good. Japan, South Korea, Singapore have set aggressive goals for education achievement and invested in achieving those goals. As a result, they consistently rank among the top performing nations on standardized tests and other metrics judging the quality of education. So that's really exciting. To be honest, though, real estate in Japan is really expensive, so you'd want to consider renting. I do know of a rental listing there. Only one, though. It's the last one, but it's last, but it's not leased. Get it? It's not leased because it's a rental. Anyway, but it is in an earthquake zone. But don't worry, it'll still rock your world. Get it? Rock your world, earthquake zone. Okay, yeah, that one wasn't very good either. But let's move on. Malaysia has attempted to protect its national identity and promote racial equity by requiring schools to be taught in native language, Malay, as well as instituting different versions of affirmative action in higher education and government employment, trying to improve equity. Unfortunately, the efforts have largely backfired as prioritization of the Malay language and Malay people has hampered with their ability to work with the global environment. The affirmative action has created a lot of discrimination against the East Asian citizens in Malaysia. So there's that. With the exception of Singapore, the rest of Southeast Asia could be an exciting place to shop for real estate. Again, there's a lot of great beaches, a lot of great scenery, a lot of great food, a lot of nice people. But as far as development of human capital goes, it's a mixed bag. The political situation in the Philippines isn't great right now. It hasn't been great in Bangkok. There's been sort of mild civil distress in Bangkok for a long time. By the way, that reminds me of a story. So one night in Bangkok, I was at this restaurant, and this lady was staring at me across the restaurant, and I said to my friend, she's got to be a property inspector because she's totally checking me out. Get it? Okay, another real estate pun. Sorry about that. So Vietnam it has some exciting growth opportunity, but again, I don't know that I'd invest in real estate there personally. So I've saved Europe for last because the exchange rate isn't super friendly to Americans buying real estate there. However, there's still plenty of affordable options in different parts of Europe. Europe is a fairly big and diverse place. Who wouldn't want to live close to museums and cathedrals? Speaking of cathedrals, there's a joke I heard about high ceilings, but you know what? I can't remember it. You know what? It was over my head. Never mind. Get it? High ceilings over my head? Yeah. Okay. So the European Union tries to really push a commitment toward education. The EU member states signed the Maastricht Treaty in 1992 with commitments for member states to work towards social cohesion, which would include, to a limited extent, social services, which, to a limited extent, gave some jurisdiction over education, primarily around the subject of equality, such as forbidding member states to segregate Roma children into special needs schools, as well as encouraging cooperation between member states, if necessary, by supporting and supplementing their action, while fully respecting the responsibility of the member states for the content of teaching and the organization of education systems. So, some cohesive group efforts to improve, but still respecting the autonomy of individual countries. In 2000, they agreed to what was called the Lisbon Strategy to modernize the knowledge economy. In 2010, they worked to integrate education guidelines with economic growth goals. New benchmarks for 2020 included 95% of children over age 4 in preschool, at least 85% of 15-year-olds reading and doing math and science at grade level, 90% of a graduation rate, 40% of people over age 30 possessing a higher education degree or certification, and 15% adults 35 and over pursuing some form of lifelong learning. Nations like Australia and the Netherlands and Luxembourg have really taken those benchmarks seriously. Luxembourg, for example, established a new university and a national space program trying to collaborate with space travel. So again, some of the countries in Europe are really making strides in education, investing in human capital. Germany has always done a great job investing in human capital. One controversial strategy is they place students on different educational tracks as soon as possible. It's good in that it focuses on developing people's talents and skills most needed for employment. However, it can be problematic because they deselect children who may develop a talent or a passion later in life. Germany has rigorous social services to help children overcome challenges from poverty and other issues jeopardizing their well-being. So anyway, Germany's education system is not perfect, but they definitely try to invest in human capital. Eastern European nations Eastern European countries who wanted to join the EU were required to commit to those 2020 benchmarks, which has spurred some improvement in Eastern Europe. By and large, Eastern Europe has still struggled, trying to recover from the Soviet system. During the Soviet era, the national education system was mostly on a national level. It emphasized literacy and vocational training for careers in industry and agriculture. However, during the last 30 years, as the national systems has struggled with funding, now that the Soviet Union's gone, these countries have struggled to maintain the same quality of education as they had before. Plus, reliance on Russian natural gas has forced several nations like Belarus to remain tied to the Russian economy and sphere of influence in spite of a desire to strengthen ties with the European Union and North America. So again, Eastern Europe is very affordable. The schools aren't that bad, but they're dealing with those struggles. Britain is really expensive for Americans. I wouldn't recommend selling a house in America and buying one in the UK. But as far as schools go, they do take investing in human capital seriously. The UK in the last 30 years has really tried to strengthen national control of education by allowing schools to opt out of local control. By centralizing the control, they're hoping to better establish and enforce standards and accountability. Ironically, it's the exact opposite of what governments and entities are trying to get African nations to do. But during the last 50 to 60 years, the UK has worked to diversify its secondary school offerings, giving teens the best choices possible and the best training for tertiary education as possible. So again, a lot of exciting things happen in Britain. I think the gold standard is set by the Nordic nations. They see elementary and secondary education as a chance to provide equal opportunities for all children, whereas in many countries, they segregate children and perpetuate economic, cultural, and political disadvantages. The Nordic countries, they're not great on parent choice. Honestly, not that great on parent choice, but they use their system to desegregate and create economic, cultural, and political advantages for kids. A commitment to equal opportunity prompts some nations to use schools to provide children with all the services that they need to be successful. So they're addressing all their problems and really investing in their kids. Russia is honestly, I wouldn't recommend your family move to Russia right now with the political climate. However, per pupil spending as a percentage of GDP has been increasing. It's up to 4.6% now as of 2009. Literacy is nearly 100%, and the nation scored 8th place in a recent ranking based on standardized test scores, as well as investment in education and education policy. However, it is such a big country that equity is still a major concern. Experts praise Russia's commitment to developing human capital, but complain there's a disconnect between education goals and the needs of the economy. Experts say Russia's rigid national control of education has moved too slowly to transition from a system supporting a Soviet economy to the current capitalist economy and globalization. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend Russia, but they're doing a good job. Their schools are quite decent. So that's a lot to take in. Remember, even the United States is not without its faults. Here in America, it's widely observed that American children are from poor backgrounds generally achieve lower levels of schooling because of either lack of resources or because family backgrounds and characteristics may affect attitudes and motivation. Or sometimes families just lack the information needed to make wise educational decisions. The people have tried to respond to these challenges by investing more in preschools. It's proving more and more that every dollar spent in preschool is going to bring a bigger return on the investment than in education in high school, where most people are thinking you solve the problems of poverty and lack of finishing education and continuing further education. But helping a family prioritize education for its little ones is the best way to facilitate that little one eventually going to college or trade school, studies have shown. However, unlike the Nordic nations, fear of socialism has made investment in services for kids, especially ones that take kids out of the home earlier to be placed in the care of government, aka preschools, which are really good for their education. They've become a hard sell here in America. However, the popularity of Bernie Sanders suggests that the number of Americans supporting a more Nordic approach to education may be increasing. So if you do decide to stay stateside, I strongly warn you against using a dual agent, however, for buying and selling, because those dual agents, they sleep really well. They lie on one side and then they lie on the other side. Okay, that's just another real estate joke to sort of finish this out, but don't tell anybody I told you that joke. I probably shouldn't have told that joke. I think it's funny, but still, I hope that I've given you some things to think about. Let's read over to the email that I sent with all this facts. Let's check back in a week. Let's see, what is today? Today's Friday, TGIF. Just kidding. As a realtor, I haven't said TGIF since the Clinton administration. But anyway, let's meet up again in a week and talk about your thoughts. And then we can set some appointments to look at individual properties in the countries you're most interested in. I think that's the best route to take. Okay. So have a good night then.